If you've tuned into this podcast, I believe that you are uncommon. I believe an ember burns deep inside of you, searching for the fuel to grow into an inferno. Unlike most men, you are no longer content with mediocrity. Unlike most men, you are ready to commit to a change. Unlike most men, you know that you were meant for more. And unlike most men, you are willing to make the sacrifices necessary to uncover the hero, not only for yourself, but for those you love and value most. Welcome to Heroes Wanted. I'm your host, Joe Prim. As I celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the release of my book, Open 6 Life-Changing Principles, I have a special bundle that is available for you right now. If you go to heroeswanted.us/book, this bundle includes not only a PDF digital copy of the book along with the audiobook, but some other trainings that come along with it to help it make its impact a little quicker, and have a training in there as well for the journal program that I have been working on this year to improve and add journaling as a regular habit for myself. Again, heroeswanted.us/book. This is a good way if you have not been able to check out that book yet. This is half the price that the Kindle version costs on Amazon. It's a great way to get this book in front of you, get the audiobook version, this is the first time that that's been available, as well as support this podcast and support the work that I'm doing here. So again, heroeswanted.us/book. For this episode, we are going to change it up, along with talking about growth and a growth mindset and the importance of that, understanding some of the battles that we as men regularly fight. I think something that's very important is that we continue educating ourselves as to what's going on in our world. That we don't shy away from technology, don't put our heads in the sand until things become too big for us to really grasp, but that we always put in the efforts and energies to at least know enough about things to have a conversation, at least know enough about things so that we can have a better understanding of what is on the horizon. So when I met the guest for this podcast, Kyle Sponable, and he began to talk to me about NFTs and blockchain and cryptocurrency, I wanted to have him on here as a guest because these are the types of technologies that are easy in the moment right now to kind of write off as not really that important in our day-to-day life. Something that just does not quite seem practical, as I mentioned in this podcast, almost like the idea of streaming movies did when we were still spending our Friday evenings at Blockbuster. But the more knowledge that we can have of this technology, I think the better off that we can be. I think that these technologies also offer a freedom, and along with freedom comes some fear. Real freedom means that there's some unknown there. So I think the more educated we can get, Kyle does a great job of really breaking these down into the basic pieces. Breaks them down so that we can understand what they are, what the possibilities for them, and how they can end up impacting us in the future. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Again, a little different than what I normally do on this podcast, but yet at the same time, it's an enjoyable podcast. We have a great conversation. I learned a lot, and I hope that you will as well. So let's jump into it.
Well, my name is Kyle Sponable. I am the CTO of the Consortia project, amongst many other endeavors. We are the first NFT that can actually pay you to own it. You can check us out at consortia.network. That's consortia.network. Been doing IT for most of my adult life. I did my first professional IT job at 15 years old. I've been programming since I was 12. Came up through the ranks from help desk all the way up to senior engineer, and then I made the jump to my own
So obviously you started out in tech at a very, very young age. What sparked that? Where did that come from?
I just always liked taking stuff apart at the end of the day. I always wanted to know how things worked, and then I always liked putting them back together to make other things. And a lot of times I didn't always have the exact parts I would need to build something, so I'd have to go crawl around the Goodwill or dumpsters or whatever to find what I needed to make it, because, it's a lot easier now than it was then, but components don't just grow on trees, if that makes sense.
Yeah, were you one of those guys that go to Radio Shack?
Oh yeah, I have very fond memories of Radio Shack. I grew up in the New York Capital District, Albany, Schenectady, Detroit. There was a lot of R&D around there, so there was a lot of dumpsters to dive in, and you could always find really cool stuff if you knew where to look. Radio Shack, there was all kinds of electronics dealers, and I remember a couple of these old shops, they still had tube testers and tubes from just the most random stuff lying around. It's just amazing what you'll find.
Yeah, I'll bet you wish you could go back and check out some of that stuff now that you have a little bit different eye on old antiquities of computer.
Well, yeah, and doing that gave me kind of an understanding of how tech evolved, because in essence, the only thing that we've done is we haven't really changed too much in the past, I'd say 30 or 40 years. We just added a lot of stuff on top of it. Yeah, we've changed processors and things like that, but in the end of the day, they all shuffle instructions around. They all work in very, very similar ways. They're just there's just more transistors on the chips. There's just more stuff going on, but the same core things still exist. So by seeing it and taking it apart and then recombobulating it into things as best I could, I learned a way to see systems. And then once you can see a system, building is not really that difficult. It's like Legos at the end of the day.
Can you give us an example of something you built or were playing around with, or a project that you put together?
My parents were always kind of worried that they would come home to a crater, but one time I found a carbon fiber tube and a roll of 27 miles of winder cable, and I built a coil gun. Which, if you're familiar with railguns and mass drivers, that's what that was when I was younger. I was always into doing all sorts of weird stuff.
Putting pieces together and making new things. It's awesome. Playing around and experimenting with that in your early years. And then around 15, I think you said you got into programming. What drove that? Kind of the same idea?
Well, yeah, because I wanted to make things to do my projects. And, you're going to just have to learn to do it if you want to make computers and mechanical things work these days. So you just went ahead and did it.
Did you self-teach yourself a lot of that, Kyle?
Yeah, actually I did. Forums, there was books I could occasionally get my hands on. Again, resources these days are just much, much richer. It's a lot easier to do now than it was then. Before we would have to type things in from books. Now you can go on a website like learnpython.org and have free live lessons there to handhold you through the basics. That was unheard of back then.
With having a childhood like that of experimenting with technology and putting pieces together, building things, and then learning to program to make things work, what do you think that early start and that type of thing has done for you as an adult? Where did that drive you to, and what did you learn from that?
You have to, if you're going to survive anything like that, and if you're going to patent things, and if you're going to build things, you have to very much find your own reasons to do them. It's not like homework or a job where you get paid. Necessarily, you can strike it rich with one of these things, and maybe this time I did. But for the most part, you have to build them for your own reasons, and you have to want to do it. It's not something you can just do for the money. You will not make it. End of story.
So do you think, too, that building your own things and learning how to program and stuff was a challenge, too, I would imagine? So the whole time as as a young man growing up, you're challenging yourself to think outside the box, to be creative, to make new things, to conjure up new ideas. Do you think that you're still doing that today?
Well, absolutely. And if you're familiar, are you familiar with NFTs and crypto?
I am somewhat, but I would love for you to break that down as simple as you possibly can, Kyle.
Well, for right now, all an NFT is a digital deed. As a deed would be to a piece of property or a title to a car, an NFT is to a piece of digital ephemera stuff. What I did was I made an NFT that can essentially pay dividends to its owner. In the NFT world, that is absolutely huge. As you can imagine, I'm hoping it's going to be quite a spectacular thing when it goes off. Now, as crypto, what you have to understand is all crypto is a giant ledger. It's just a giant spreadsheet that tracks transactions, and it's just basically a list of entries, which each entry references the entry before it. And because of that, you can establish an unbroken chain of provenance, and thus it's much, much, much harder to forge or alter. It's a pretty neat technology, and it's more than just the MLM Ponzi schemes that it's reputed to be due to some of the unsavory types that got into it in its early years. It's just the next generation of ledger. That's really, at the end of the day, what it is.
So I know a lot of people question the value of digital, right? Mm-hmm. But way back, I would say probably, maybe at least 10 or 12 years ago, I would buy a video game, right? And I would buy that video game when it first was released, and that video game would come with a different outfit or a different weapon or maybe a downloadable level or something like that. And a lot of times what I would do to help me pay for that video game, Kyle, was sell that digital content on eBay. And sometimes I could even make enough money off of just that digital content to pay for the game itself. Is that similar to an NFT, or the idea behind it is the value is whenever somebody's going to pay for it?
Yes, exactly. And that's a use that NFTs have been adopted to very quickly. And you're seeing that new in play to earn and other gaming avenues. But I'm focusing on kind of taking it in a more utilitarian approach and something that's of more value, and I hope we'll find uses in other industries for, shall we say, more serious investors, not just a few either rich guys with a hobby, but like actual institutions. That's what this project is hoping to come. And I am being a little bit vague because we haven't released all of the details yet, so I apologize for that.
No, that's okay. Right now, as you said, NFTs are kind of, from what I'm seeing, everything from DC Comics to artists are selling maybe a single version of a single type of something for either a set fee or maybe an auction on that. Or I've even seen podcasters maybe have a podcast that will be unreleased ever, except for somebody owns the NFT for it. Now, like you said, this doesn't seem very practical, except for people maybe with a hobby or that like to collect things. Or I've also seen like maybe video clips or things like that, where it just doesn't seem very practical. Can you give us, even if it's not exactly what you're working on right now, give us some examples of how we could see this move forward into the future to become something more practical and more accepted amongst the general population?
Well, for example, digital downloads of software in any kind. You're talking Microsoft Office, you're talking obviously video games, anything that you buy and download and then would sometime otherwise want to resell. For example, let's say you buy a digital movie. You could, in the future, sell that on the open market again. And and not be pirating it, essentially losing your rights to view it using NFTs. There's all kinds of new technologies. At the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, in what way could a title or certificate of ownership be useful? That is where you'd find NFTs.
It's like we had streaming video while Blockbuster was open still.
Mm-hmm.
Streaming video was in its very early days, wasn't very good. And in fact, most of us could never have even at that point saw the day where we would be able to stream a movie in HD right into our living room. But other people were working on that project. And I like your practical idea of movie rental or buying a CD or something like that way, so you could also resell it in the future. Any other ways where you could see that be practical with having a license to something?
I mean, at the end of the day, that's more a subject matter expert. A lot of these guys are adapting. They learn NFTs and adapt it to what they do. You have to remember, when adopting new technologies like this, it's not usually some computer guy who invents the technology that does it. They'll invent something like whoever invented the NFT, the ERC 720, I believe it is, standard. It's up to somebody like me to come along and say, I can use it for this. I'm going to go make this product. And then somebody else in another sector will say, hey, this does what we're doing here a whole lot better. Let's adopt it here. So on and so forth. And then eventually you start to see the process and the technology bloom.
On something like an NFT, if somebody wanted to let's just say shop around for an NFT today, just to kind of learn more about it, what would you do and how does that work?
You really have to do a lot of due diligence, because at the end of the day, the NFT itself is just a deed. The actual piece of content is hosted in different places. You can actually lose your NFTs if you're not careful. You need to look at the provenance of the author, because right now you can fake them fairly easily. And you have to do a lot more due diligence than you would something even like crypto, which is becoming more and more mainstream by the day. OpenShift is a good place to start. Due to some specific requirements, we're going to be launching our own. We're looking at launching our own marketplace. So I don't really actually, believe it or not, even though I built an NFT technology, I actually don't buy NFTs very much as it stands, because I've always kind of focused more on something that provides a value that is intrinsic to its own versus something like an art collector. And I've kind of actually had to learn the world of NFTs, and it's been a really amazing journey.
How many years have NFTs been being used kind of in the way that they are right now?
I've been pretty much focusing on just the technology adaptation of this, but I only think it's been 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 at the most.
So realistically, we're really early in the NFT cycle.
Yes, we very much are. I think you're starting to see what would be the first generation of NFTs. And now I think we're going to start seeing more utility-focused NFTs that exist for a purpose other than being an NFT. And that's when we're going to actually start seeing adoption of the technology, which speaks to better things for the cryptoverse itself. Because once you start seeing other use cases other than just blockchain, you start to see the entire ecosystem just explode. And that's going to be a really good thing for crypto hodlers, crypto investors, crypto developers, because it's kind of like I'd say we're about what the early 90s was for computers. Things are just starting to get in use, and we're waiting for that first killer .com explosion to really take off, and then we'll see what blockchain can actually really do.
Yeah, where it becomes more mainstream and more understood and more used by everybody because it just makes sense.
Yeah, it does the job better and easier than our traditional systems.
Since we've been talking a little bit about crypto, can you kind of break down into very simple terms? Crypto, I think it's become more popular, actually as each day goes by. It's brought up so constantly, whether negative or positive, and it seems like mostly negative these days. And I think even negativity drives it into the news and drives it into people's minds. So we obviously believe that it's going to continue to grow and probably at some point here really explode beyond what a lot of these people are predicting. Where do you see it going, and what do you see it as being useful for the average person other than just kind of a little bit of an investment at this point?
Well, at the end of the day, crypto is just a way to verify a transaction through a ledger. So let's take this back to what we do now. We keep spreadsheets, we keep ledgers, and what are spreadsheets and ledgers used for? Coming from an IT background, I will tell you they power every business and everything everywhere, much to the bane of the IT guy's existence. They store data in a way that can be understood, verified, and displayed. So the question then becomes, what do you use a spreadsheet for? My wife, I've seen use it for all kinds of things, ranging from her many jobs as a CPA. I've seen spreadsheets used to manage in my career from $100 budget to multi-million, multi-billion-dollar projects. At the end of the day, that's what I see blockchain becoming, as just a universal way to store data. For example, PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the largest accounting firms in the world, is backing a cryptocurrency called VeChain for supply chain management. You're starting to see it get adopted in places like China, which you can have your own opinions on them. The fact is, it's getting used. It's actually getting used by Walmart in China. Renault, BMW are using it. It's been used to track, for example, COVID vaccinations. It's been used to track all sorts of different things, and you're going to see it start to track more and more. Because at the end of the day, blockchains are going to prove, I believe, a more redundant and more reliable source of data than, say, a hard drive, which can fail. Again, it's not for every case, but you're going to start to see the cases where it is useful start to explode. We're seeing right now a lot of Filecoin and file storage cryptos being built. So that's indicative of we're moving from just transactional databases, which were the first computer use cases, to files, which was kind of the second computer iteration of computers. So we're actually kind of following a very similar track to the way computers were built back in the day.
Do you believe that it's been the cryptocurrency that's driven blockchain, or is that just kind of what's kept it afloat long enough here for it to become readily acceptable, or people to know enough about it or see the practicality enough of it? Is cryptocurrency going to continue?
What you have to understand is the value of a blockchain isn't the cryptocurrency on it, it's the data it holds at the end of the day. So those coins are going to become valuable because they are tied to the value of the data with which they're storing. So, for example, Ethereum is more and more valuable because you need it to run operations on what is coming the de facto standard blockchain. So what we're going to see is it's really actually hard to answer that question at the end of the day, because crypto, I mean, who could have seen back in the days of transactional punch cards and mainframe databases that we would be doing what we're doing right now? Who would have seen that coming?
Very, very few people, if any. And if they were real dreamers, or really had the secret book in their lap.
Exactly. And the thing, at the end of the day, it's really hard to see what it's going to be used for because there's new things that didn't exist back then. But we are kind of following it. It went from transactional to file-based, and then from file-based to easily used and consumed. And then once that happened, it exploded. So we're right now starting to see files getting into the blockchain and it moving from just raw transactions. So I think we're going to see something similar in the next 5 to 10 years.
What are some predictions, Kyle? Just kind of out there, what are some predictions on where you see either crypto or both, or NFTs or blockchain? What are kind of some of your out there predictions of where you could see things going in the next 5 or 10 years?
I could see people starting to prefer cryptocurrencies to their normal traditional currency. it's kind of hard to ignore what's going on in the world, what's going on with Russia, what's going on with the Ukraine, and wherever you stand on that, you do have to beg a question. If somebody can shut an entire country off from the financial system, do you want to have all your eggs in that financial system? I'm certain you're just starting to see, for example, El Salvador adopted Bitcoin as a means of national currency. You're starting to see the Russians accept and the Chinese accept payment for massive shipments of oil in Bitcoin. You're starting to see the core of the financial system shift to crypto. I'm not sure what that's going to look like. I do see that it becoming a much greater part of everyone's life as it becomes easier and easier to use. I can go to right down the road to my gas station and buy Bitcoin at an ATM. When that started, that would have just been unheard of. So realistically, I don't think I could envision what all these guys can build, because every day there's something new that you just have to think, wow, that's incredible that they can make that actually happen.
There's an acknowledgement there that there are some really awesome people out there working on some really incredible things that we haven't even conceived of yet. And it's exciting to watch and wait and see what will be next. Like you were saying about the being able to buy the crypto like that, as simply and easily as, going to an ATM, and to see the continual evolution of countries accepting this. Do you know much about El Salvador and how that has worked out for them as a country?
I mean, a lot of it's in Spanish. I haven't seen too much of it in English, which makes it rather hard for me to really dive deep. I am hearing good things from contacts of mine who are in Latin America, and that's saying it's working out really well for them. So I am assuming that things are going very, very well. And considering some of the other options, especially for these smaller countries, either adopting a currency not their own, which by definition does not meet their needs, or relying on a reserve currency, which, I mean, as demonstrated to the Russians, could be taken from you at any time, I don't see how we're leaving them much of a choice. At the end of the day, I'm not saying what's going on over in Russia is a good thing or a bad thing, but it is happening. And if you are a world leader, I would think it would give you pause, because you have to maintain the safety and security of your nation.
Agree 100%. And what I found interesting too is the other day, the president there of El Salvador made some comments about the U.S. couldn't fall so quickly without there maybe being an enemy within. And more so than diving into the words that he said, I found it very interesting that a leader of a Central American country like that felt he had the freedom to say something like that. And I think having Bitcoin, rather than being so reliant on somebody else's currency, makes a big difference to those smaller countries.
Yes, cutting them off from the SWIFT network would utterly and totally obliterate a smaller country like, say, El Salvador, or some of the African republics, most of the world. Russia was probably one of the more resistant to that. They seem to be doing all right. So, and I saw an article today that they're forming strategic partnerships with China, India, and Iran. So we're going to start seeing an era of competition that I don't know that any fiat currency will be able to wholeheartedly stand at this point. Again, that's wild speculation. At the end of the day, what currency does is function as a means of exchange, and what's going to happen is people are going to find a way that works for them. African countries, I believe it was one of them, and unfortunately I don't have it right in front of me, tried to ban crypto. I believe it was Zimbabwe, because their currency was so inflated and people were taking money in crypto and not adopting the inflated currency. There's definitely precedent for these countries and these people adopting something not their own when the governments failed to provide it. that shit also seems to be giving leaders pause. And that's actually a risk with crypto, in that often cited in that it could be banned because of it. So in many ways, the wildest of Wild West days of crypto, I think, are done. But I still see a lot of frontier spirit left in the space. And I think it's going to be answering a lot of really heavy challenges going forward.
If nothing else, other than giving people another option, or countries another option, or organizations or businesses another option, it is very, very powerful.
I believe that's what's most powerful about crypto, is you have a choice of how you're going to discharge your affairs. You can choose to keep it on exchanges. You could choose to totally self-regulate it in your own wallet. At the end of the day, crypto is about choice. Crypto is about innovation, and crypto is mostly about trying to build better systems than the ones that exist right now.
How are crypto and NFTs tied together, if at all?
Crypto NFTs are just an application, like a program built on a blockchain. That's all they are. So, like, we're talking over Zoom right now. That is an application on your computer. So an NFT is to cryptocurrency what Zoom is to your computer.
Great analogy, Kyle. I like that.
Yeah, I've had to practice explaining it to my parents numerous times.
Well, I think the more that you can break down any of this, it goes back to me. It reminds me of the days of the VCR and people trying to program the VCR to record a TV show that they wanted to see. It was almost impossible, no matter how many times I read through the directions, even as a teenager, trying to figure out how to record a show and failing time after time, to now where it's just a matter of pushing a button. The more user-friendly that you can make things, the more highly adopted it can be. The easier it is to understand, the more people will buy into it. So the easier that people can understand these things, or understand how it can possibly benefit them moving forward, I think the faster that these things can move into a position where they benefit us.
I believe it was Albert Einstein that said, a genius only makes the complicated simple. And I've kind of adopted that throughout my life. Generally, IT and any technology can be made ridiculously complicated. But true mastery of a technology is the ability to explain it in a way that's simple. So that's just a kind of a philosophy I've had throughout my entire career, and it served me rather well. I tend to prefer to keep everything I build to its bare minimums and not add extra fluff that just is more things to break.
We met, Kyle, on Facebook. I reached out to you, I think, just to say hello on Facebook Messenger, and we kind of messaged back and forth, and you had told me that you were working on a patent, and that you were, extremely busy, and, had your head down and were working real hard on some stuff. But you gave me, I think, a date and said, I got to get it all in by such and such a date. And I checked in with you just a couple of days after that and said, hey, how did things go? How are things looking? What was that experience like? What is it like to try to get something patent? What was it like to try to develop this? What was that like, just from an outsider's point of view, like myself?
Patenting something, especially in the NFT and crypto space, is actually very mission critical if you're going to launch a product. Because everything on the blockchain is public. Very little of it is private. None of it is proprietary. So you have to ensure your intellectual property is well managed. Making a patent pretty much varies based on what you're building. And you really definitely need to find a good patent attorney to guide you through it. In my own case, I actually expected to have to file 2 patents, but my attorney, my team of attorneys were right on the ball and were able to combine everything into one by a simple couple changes in words. And they absolutely will advise you throughout the process based on what you're building at what point to do your patent. Because I had to file my provisional so early, it definitely puts a much greater time constraint on launch dates. A provisional patent is generally what you do when you're kind of testing your device. You have 1 year from the date of file to actually file your full utility patent, or the whole thing's abandoned. So there's definitely it's definitely not something you should DIY, and it's definitely something you want to, if you think you are going to invent something, you want to do a lot of due diligence in beforehand.
When you told me you were doing the patent, I really had no idea what it was on, if it was in something in medical or pharmaceutical or anything. So when you told me it was in an NFT, it really intrigued me. I think it's really important what you pointed out there. And one thing that's really very important about blockchain and about NFTs and stuff is, like you said, everything is out there for people to see. Very little of it is private. Can you expound on that a little bit and the benefits of that? And maybe from your point of view, too, the difficulties of that?
Well, when you're building something on a blockchain, everything is stored publicly unless you encrypt it. Not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's an is thing. Every technology has things it does well and things it doesn't do so well at. When you are learning a technology, when you are building a technology, you have to do a lot of understanding before you do the building. You want to understand how these technologies work, how they're developed, how they're implemented, who's using them, and why. I would say inventing back in the early days of the late 1800s, early 1900s is a lot different than it is today, in that things kind of weren't changing that rapidly. They were very much visual, and it was a lot easier to kind of have an idea and pick something up. So it's definitely, I guess you would say, there's a lot more work you have to do when working with blockchain. And when you do buy things and when you work with your blockchain or your wallets, you do have to remember every transaction is public. So with that fact, you need to adapt it to your situation.
I don't want to keep you too late here. You got anything else you'd like to share before what you're working on, what you think the future holds? And
I honestly, what I'm working on is consortia.network, consortia.network. If anybody out there wants to check it out and sign up, you'll get information as we release it. At the end of the day, I've frequently found, studying the history of technology, anybody who made a prediction was usually either dead wrong or drastically undershot what actually came about. So I'm not going to embarrass myself like that. But what I will say is I do believe that there are thousands of absolutely brilliant minds working on new technologies. They are just, I'm just astounded when I see some of the things they're coming up with every day. And I may be here, but it's a great sector in that I'm always challenged. I may be patenting things and launching startups, but I still feel like there's still so much more to build and so much more to learn. That's the best part of it, is there's still a lot of unexplored territory left. And that's the best part of being involved with it.
Thanks, Kyle. I really appreciate this. You answered a lot of my questions, and I think that this will give people either a really good place to start or fill in some of the voids that are kind of left out from a lot of people's descriptions or understanding of crypto and blockchain. I did really enjoy my conversation with Kyle. Like I mentioned before the podcast, I learned a lot. I really appreciate the way Kyle was able to break things down into very simple terms, and at the same time give us a bit of an idea of the potential of these technologies, of what we could see them doing as we move forward. Again, I'll put the name of his company down in the show notes, but it was consortia.network, consortia.network. You can join his group there by giving him an email. That way he can keep you up to date on his NFT technology, and you can know what's going on with that. I will also leave a link to his personal Facebook page. That way, if you want to reach out to him, you've got some further questions, or you are looking into understanding NFTs, blockchain, or crypto a little bit more, I'm sure he'd be more than happy to help you out there. Dads, are you stuck? Are you feeling lost, frustrated, and lacking a purpose? Are you in a rut, going through the motions day after day and going nowhere? I know I was. If I could guarantee to get you out of this rut and to give you clarity and direction in your life, to help you find the confidence in yourself and your decisions, and to find purpose, would you take me up on that offer? Here's how it works. You work with me one-on-one. We meet once a week on Zoom for 45 minutes for the 12-week duration of the program. I'll provide you with a personalized plan to get you unstuck and very clear on where you're going. Weekly video lessons so that you can learn what you need to do. Assignments to put into practice what you learn. And challenges to get you outside of your comfort zone where growth occurs and confidence is born. And I'll even provide you with the required books, including my favorite book on leadership, Extreme Ownership, a hardback copy of that, and an awesome leather journal, several field notebooks, and the supplies needed for you to succeed will be delivered right to your front door in the U.S. If you're outside of the U.S., we'll get creative, but we'll get you what you need. Now, there will be effort and sacrifice involved because everything of value has a price. But I will be with you every step of the way with 24/7 support via text so I can keep you on task. You will have to show up on time and be prepared for the one-on-one calls, complete the lessons, challenges, and assignments. But don't worry. Where you see uncertainty right now, I see your potential. I have been there and have experienced this journey myself firsthand. Now, what happens if you show up on time and prepared for the one-on-one calls, you complete the lessons and challenges and the assignments for the duration of the program, and you don't have clarity and direction in your life, you don't feel confident in yourself and your decisions, and you haven't found your purpose? Then I'll keep coaching you for free until you do. There's absolutely no risk to you on not leveling up. This program isn't about change and it's not about evolution. It's about a new you. It's about uncovering the hero that is within you, that's been buried under years of lies, fear, and expectations of others. Sure, you can do ahead doing nothing, but you know exactly where that leads. You can try to do it yourself by reading countless books, watching a bunch of YouTube videos. Be careful, there are a lot of distractions out there. And listening to hours of podcasts, hoping to find something that clicks. But if you're serious about finally taking control of your life, dropping the excuses and becoming the husband, father, and leader you want to be, let's schedule a strategy call where we can design a plan to get you out of that rut and headed where you want to go. You can go to heroeswanted.us/coach to set up and schedule that strategy call. As always, men, hold fast and God bless.